Some places with their history like a badge of honor, polished, celebrated, remembered. Alabama is not one of them. Here, the past does not sit neatly in a museum or on a tourist plaque. It lingers in the dirt. It rises with the water. It hums beneath your feet when you are alone and swear the night should be silent. Drive long enough through its back roads and you will notice the strange stillness, the heavy air that feels like it is listening. People say it is just the South's humidity, but deep down they know better. Alabama keeps its stories close, and most of them are not the kind you tell your children before bed. Some towns were never supposed to vanish, yet they did. Some houses were meant to be homes, but became prisons for shadows. Some graves were dug, but never stayed filled. And sometimes, the ground itself opens its mouth and swallows what it wants, leaving nothing behind but fear and unanswered questions. When you stand at the edge of certain rivers here, you will hear echoes no map can explain. Step too close to certain forests, and the soil feels unsteady, like it is breathing under you. If you wander near old mansions left to rot, you might catch the sound of footsteps where no one walks. And if you look long enough into the fog along the water, you may see fire where there is no heat, faces where there should be none, or lights where no hand ever struck a match. People talk about curses as if they are old folklore, something written in yellow books, locked safely away from real life. But Alabama has a way of proving otherwise. Here, curses do not stay in stories, they climb back into reality when you least expect them. They do not warn you politely. They pull at you in whispers, or worse, in silence. So, tonight, we are not just talking about haunted houses or restless spirits. These are deeper. These are the kinds of mysteries that refuse to stay buried, the kind that bend maps, erase names, and silence voices. 6 stories from Alabama's past and present, stories of towns drowned but not gone, holes that move as if alive, mansions that breathe even after demolition, ships that burn without burning, towers that flicker with impossible light, and woods that hide doors to something no one dares admit exists. Lock your doors, not because anything's coming for you tonight, but because you need to believe you are safe while we take this road together. Put on your headphones, not just to block out the world, but because you will want these whispers close, right in your ear. And when it gets quiet, when the air drops, when you swear you are alone, do not stop listening. Because Alabama is not quiet. Not really. It remembers. And tonight, it wants to be heard. Mystery 1, the sunken town of Erie. If Alabama remembers, then the Warrior River may be its loudest memory. On the surface, it looks like any southern river, wide, calm, stretching out like a mirror under the summer sun. But step closer, and the water seems heavier than it should be, like it is carrying more than mud and fish. And in a way, it is. Just north of a place called Utah, the Warrior hides a town that once thrived, then vanished as if it had never been. Erie, Alabama. A name almost no one remembers, because it was erased faster than it was written. A town that should have grown into a landmark of resilience instead slipped beneath the river, leaving behind only whispers and fragments that rise when the droughts pull the water back. Erie was born in the early 1800s, in a time when survival meant pushing against every barrier imaginable. It was not just a settlement, it was a statement. Freedmen, black landowners, families who had carved out a piece of hope for themselves on the banks of the Warrior. They built homes, shops, churches, a school. It was not a big city, but it was alive. It pulsed with culture, with the sound of hammers building, children laughing, sermons rising on Sunday mornings. Against all odds, Erie thrived. And then it did not. The first flood seemed like accents of nature. Rivers rise, rivers fall. Everyone knows that. But in Erie, the waters came too often, too sudden, too cruel. By 1923, the last families packed their belongings and walked away. Some swore the land had been cursed. Others whispered Erie had become a target, punished for daring to succeed politically and economically when others wanted it silent. Whatever the reason, Erie disappeared. And the strangest part is not that it drowned. The strangest part is how fast history buried it. Look through the state archives, and Erie barely exists. Early maps in the 1900s list it clearly. A decade later, it is erased. Historical records shrink to a few vague lines, and some files gone, vanish without explanation. It is as though someone wanted Erie forgotten, and for the most part they succeeded. Except for the river. The river does not forget. When the water runs low, Erie returns in pieces. A set of stone steps half buried in mud. Rusted street signs poking up like broken bones. Foundations of homes, cracked but still clinging to their place. Divers talk about Stranger Things doors underwater that lead to nowhere, frames of buildings with windows still intact, glass unbroken despite a century below the current. One diver swore he felt knocking from inside a submerged structure, slow, deliberate, as if someone was waiting. In 2011, a kayaker thought he saw sunlight reflecting off the ripples near Erie's resting place. He paddled closer, but what he saw was not reflection at all. It was a light flickering from below the surface, pale and unsteady, like the glow of a lantern. He blinked and it vanished. But what chilled him was not the disappearance, it was the sudden drop in temperature, the kind that makes your skin tighten even in the middle of July. Fishermen in Greene County talk about echoes that do not belong. They cast their lines under the bridge and hear sounds bouncing back, voices, shouts, sometimes laughter. And when they call out to see if anyone's nearby, the river stays silent. One camper once claimed to hear footsteps crunching through dry leaves, only to remember the entire forest around him was flooded. He stepped outside his tent and saw her woman, standing ankle-deep in water where there was no ground, watching him, silent, still. He never camped there again. Older residents say Erie never got a proper goodbye. No ceremony, no relocation, no recognition. Families were forced to scatter, homes either bulldozed or left to rot until the water claimed them. Maybe that is why Erie refuses to stay buried, because it was denied closure. And if there's one thing spirits can't stand, it is being ignored. In 2019, a research team from the University of Alabama placed hydrophones in the Warrior to study sediment. For 3 nights, the microphones picked up something they could not explain, a low hum, deep and rhythmic, vibrating up from the riverbed near Erie's original coordinates. It was not mechanical. It was not natural. It was something, a pulse, almost like a heartbeat. When the equipment was pulled out, the sound never came back. No explanation, no official paper, just whispers in academic halls about a recording that no one wants to admit exists. Erie is proof that some towns do not just die, they wait. Beneath the surface, beneath the silence, they keep themselves alive. And the Warrior River, calm and steady to anyone passing through, is more than just water. It is memory made liquid, holding tight to something that does not want to be forgotten. But if Erie was only the beginning, then Alabama has much darker places, places where the ground does not just remember, it moves. And once you hear about what waits in Butler County, you will start to wonder if the land itself can hunger. Mystery 2, the scatter pit. If Erie showed us how a town can vanish without ever really leaving, Butler County shows us something stranger, a place where the ground itself refuses to stay put. Imagine a hole that won't stay filled, a pit that swallows everything you feed it, only to reappear later as if it is alive. Locals call it the Scatter Pit, named after the man tied to its first stories, Bill Sketter. Sketter lived in the mid-1800s, a farmer by record, but people whispered otherwise. He was solitary, secretive, and wrong somehow, like he did not fit with the land around him. He owned a narrow strip of ground on the edge of what is now part of the Kanaka National Forest. No family, no workers, no children playing outside his shack. Just a man in his soil. But the whispers were not idle. Oral histories say people began disappearing near his land. Farmers, hunters, even travelers who strayed too far into those woods. When the sheriff finally rode out to investigate in 1864, they did not find bodies, but they found something else. A shack, abandoned, and near it, a hole. No one could say how deep it went. The reports mentioned blood in the dirt, tools scattered like they had been dropped in panic, and a rope that vanished into the dark without returning. The land was seized, and for years no one touched it. Locals avoided it the way you avoid a snake. You do not need to see it to know it is waiting. But the ground never stopped opening. In the 1930s, A timber company tried to log the area. Their machines broke through brush and found the hole again. They tried to fill it first with debris, then with concrete, then with reinforced steel beams. Each time, they came back to nothing. The concrete cracked. The beams disappeared. Even the trees they pushed in were gone, as though swallowed whole. The company shut down operations quietly, and the forest was left to itself once more. Then came the stories from teenagers in the 1970s. Hiking, drinking, daring each other to be braver than the next. They stumbled across the pit, and one of them, Alan T., wrote about it later. He described it as a perfect circle, silent, with no echo. They threw rocks in, waited for minutes, and never heard a sound. One boy leaned too close and lost his shoe. They listened for it to land. It never did. When they came back the next day, the hole was not there, not filled, not covered, gone. But a week later, it returned, same size, same shape, only 20 feet away, as though it had walked. Attempts to map it failed. Coordinates shifted, GPS scrambled, even compasses spun without reason. In 2008, a university research team placed a soil sensor at the edge of the pit. Within seconds, the device went dead. When they returned to retrieve it, the sensor was gone. In its place lay the body of a deer unmarked, no wounds, no blood. Its eyes wide open, facing the pit, as if it had seen something it could not understand. Some say it is a sinkhole system, but there is no limestone here, no cars to explain it. Others claim it is a natural vent, but thermal scans showed nothing, no heat, no cold, just a blank. And still, hunters whisper that at night, the pit glows faintly, that when the wind dies, they hear a hum rising from its depths. A hum that feels too steady, too deliberate, like machinery buried far below. What unnerves people most is not the swallowing or the vanishing. It is the feeling. Everyone who has stood at the edge says the same thing in different words, that the ground does not feel empty. It feels aware, like something beneath the soil is listening. The scatter pit does not appear on maps, but if you search through old forestry charts, you will find strange circular clearings, empty spaces not labeled or explained. And even now, the deed to build Sketter's land still exists. No one's claimed it in over 150 years. Maybe no one dares. Because how do you own a piece of land that refuses to stay still? How do you claim ground that does not want to be closed? If Erie was a town that memory refused to erase, the scatter pit is a place where memory is not enough. It is a land itself that resists, shifting, devouring, reappearing, as though it is waiting for something or someone. And if a hole in the earth can listen, what about a house? What about walls and windows built not just a shelter, but to trap? Drive farther north to Cortland, and you will find whispers of a mansion that should have been torn down forever, yet still casts its shadow across the hill where it once stood. Mystery 3, Rocky Hill Castle. The scatter pit makes you wonder if the land itself can hunger. But on a hill just outside Cortland, Alabama, something else happened, something that suggests not just the ground, but the very walls a house can breathe. Rocky Hill Castle. The name sounds like it belongs in a Southern romance novel, but the truth of it is far darker. In the 1820s, James Saunders, a wealthy planter, decided to make a statement. He chose a hilltop surrounded by cotton fields and ordered a mansion built grand enough to outshine anything around it. Greek revival columns, marble floors, sweeping staircases. His dream was power carved into stone. But long before the first brick was laid, the land resisted. Cherokee hunters avoided the hill. Enslaved workers begged not to sleep on the property, whispering that the trees watched them and that the soil breathed. Saunders ignored them. He built anyway. And by the 1850s, Rocky Hill Castle towered above the countryside, a symbol of wealth. But power does not silence what is already alive. It only gives it walls. When the Civil War came, the house became a Confederate command post. Soldiers reported footsteps in empty halls, doors slamming in rooms with no wind, and worst of all, a figure dressed in black who would climb the staircase slowly, only to vanish into a wall. At first they laughed, until too many saw it. After the war, the house passed from one owner to another, and each family left quicker than the last. In 1903, a Montgomery businessman bought Rocky Hill Castle with plans to restore it. He hired laborers and caretakers. Within weeks, all of them quit. One worker, interviewed by a local paper, described seeing a woman standing at the top of the stairs every night at 2 a.m. She never moved, never spoke, but her face, he swore her mouth was too wide, her eyes hollow, as though her skin was just a mask. The story spread. Teenagers dared each other to enter. In 1936, a group claimed they found candles burning inside, though no one had stepped into the house in years. In 1951, another group ran screaming from the library after seeing something crawl across the ceiling. Police found their flashlights still glowing on the floor inside. The boys themselves were discovered miles away, trembling in the woods. One of them never spoke about that night again. But the most consistent story is not of a ghost or a woman, it is of a shadow. Everyone who entered Rocky Hill Castle spoke of it. A shape darker than darkness itself, taller than any man, standing at the end of the hallway. It did not chase, did not attack. It just waited, watching. People said it was not in the house, it was a house. The very structure had grown a will, and was aware of anyone who crossed its threshold. By 1961, the mansion had decayed into ruin. Fires scarred it, storms cracked its walls, and finally, it was demolished. Locals thought that would end the stories, but it did not. Drivers on Highway 20 still report glimpsing a mansion at dusk, its silhouette rising just where the castle once stood. Always clear, always there, until night falls and dissolves back into shadow. Hikers find stone steps in the grass, leading up to nothing, vanishing into the sky. The land remains empty, no houses, no fences, just trees and wind. Yet people swear they hear pacing across the hilltop, slow and heavy, as though someone is still patrolling a home that no longer stands. What disturbs historians most is not the ghost stories, it is the crypt. Beneath the west wing, Saunders had built a family crypt. When the mansion was torn down, no one touched it. No record shows it being opened. No one knows where those remains lie now, or if they lie still. Rocky Hill Castle was supposed to prove Saunders' power. Instead, it became a monument to shadows that do not vanish, even when the walls come down. And if a house can outlive its own destruction, what about a ship? What about a vessel swallowed by fire and water, only to return, night after night, on a river where its passengers still scream? Mystery 4. The Vanishing Tomb of Eliza Battle. Rocky Hill Castle teaches us that walls can outlast their own ruin. But on the Tombigbee River, Alabama learned that even fire and water can't erase a story. On the night of March 1st, 1858, the grand steamboat Eliza Battle set out carrying wealthy passengers, bales of cotton stacked high, and the pride of the South gliding on dark water. She was ornate, elegant, the kind of vessel built not just to carry but to impress. That night, though, pride burned. Somewhere below deck, a spark found the cotton, and within minutes, the boat was an inferno. Flames licked the sky, passengers screamed, some leapt into a freezing river, others clung to burning wood. A few made it to shore. More than 30 never did. Those who drowned were buried quickly along the riverbanks in simple graves. But others were never found, swept away by water and fire together. You would think the story would end there a tragedy, a wreck, a few fading lines in a newspaper. But Alabama does not bury its stories neatly. Not long after, fishermen began whispering about what they would see in the fog. A ship drifting upriver, tall and silent. First they thought it was just another vessel. Then came the smell of smoke. Then the sound of crackling wood. And suddenly, before their eyes, the entire boat was ablaze, glowing orange against the black water. Passengers visible, screaming without voices, their mouths wide, their hands reaching out. And then, just as suddenly, gone. No heat, no wake, only silence. Some call it mirage, the river playing tricks with light. But the sighting spread. Hunters, dock workers, travelers crossing bridges at night, they all reported the same vision. The Eliza Battle on fire, doomed to repeat its final night again and again. In 1915, a man named Walter Sims set out to disprove the legend. He brought a compass, a lantern, and a journal. That night, he wrote only one line. "There's a light on the river. It is not mine." His body was found 2 days later by the water's edge. His lungs were full, but there were no bruises, no struggle. His compass, strangely, was melted as though it had touched fire. Decades later, in the 1970s, sonar teams from the University of Alabama claimed to have located the wreck. A structure, metallic and hollow, exactly where the records said it should be. But when they returned with diving gear, it was gone. The scan showed nothing but smooth riverbed, as though the river itself had erased the evidence. And the river was not finished. In 2003, the Clark County Historical Society attempted to relocate one of the mass graves of the victims. Permits were filed. Ground-penetrating equipment was brought in. But when they dug, there was nothing. No wood, no bones, only scorched soil that stayed frozen hard even under the July sun. To this day, people claim the Eliza Battle still sails. They have heard piano music drifting out of the fog, seen silhouettes dancing on burning decks, smelled smoke where there was no fire. The river does not let her rest. Maybe it is punishment, maybe it is mourning, or maybe something aboard that night was never meant to burn and still refuses to be buried. If Erie is a town drowned but not dead, and Rocky Hill Castle is a house torn down but still standing, then the Eliza Battle is proof that even destruction is not final. Fire may consume, water may cover, but some stories keep rising from the current. And just when you think fire can't burn without flame, and rivers can't glow without reason, Alabama answers with something strange, a house where light itself refuses to go out. A mansion where grief climbed into the tower, and night after night, the flame still flickers. Mystery 5. The Death Lights of the Dish House Tower. The Eliza Battle shows us how fire can return where no match was ever struck. But in Tuscaloosa, there is a house where the flame never left at all. A mansion built to show wealth, discipline, permanence, yet the only thing permanent was a glow that refuses to die. The Dish House, and the tower that still burns with impossible light. Dr. John Dish built it in 1837, a man of medicine, money, and control. His wife, Sarah, was a widow when they married, a woman who'd already lost once, but agreed to start again in his grand design. The house was massive, 2 stories of brick and wood, dozens of rooms, and above them all, a narrow cupola, what locals called a widow's watch. From there, you could see storms roll and across the horizon. You could see who came and who left. It was supposed to be a symbol of vision and permanence. Instead, it became a warning. When John died in 1867, some said a fall. Others a heart attack. Sarah unraveled. She kept his body in the parlor far longer than custom allowed, lit candles around him, whispered to him as if he were only sleeping. She insisted that when her own funeral came, the same candles must be relit, so that she and John could share the same flame. But when Sarah finally passed, her caretakers could not find them. The ritual broke, and that is when the lights began. Neighbors walking past the mansion late at night saw a faint orange glow flickering in the tower. At first they thought children had snuck in, playing with lanterns. But when police arrived, the house was locked, empty, no matches, no wiring, no footprints in the dust. And yet, the glow kept returning. Over the years, the reports piled up. In 1901, someone swore the tower was engulfed in fire. The fire brigade rushed to the scene, only to find no flames, not even heat. One officer claimed the light blinked out the moment he stepped through the gate. But what stayed with him was not the darkness, it was a figure he saw behind the glass, a pale outline staring back from the tower window. In 1932, a group of college girls dared each other to spend the night inside. They lasted barely an hour. One said the tower did not just glow, it pulsed, like a living heartbeat of fire. Another confessed she saw hands pressed against the glass from the inside, hands she swore were Sarah's. When asked why she had not screamed, she only whispered, "Because I knew they were hers." Time did not stop it. Even when the house was renovated in 2012 into an event venue, staff reported strange flickers captured on security cameras, lights that did not appear in person. Guests heard footsteps overhead when the attic was locked. One woman swore she saw a face in the mirror, smoke forming the outline of a woman who was not there. The tower still stands, and so does the flame. Locals say when the weather turns dry and the night holds still, the glow in the tower burns brighter, as if Sarah is still searching for the moment she was promised and never received. Maybe it is mourning. Maybe it is warning. Or maybe grief itself learned to keep the fire alive. But if the dish house shows us how grief lights a room long after death, Alabama has one more secret that makes even grief feel small. South of Montgomery, there's a patch of forest that hums at night. No flames, no footsteps, no ghosts. Just the earth itself, vibrating like something enormous is turning beneath it. A place where hunters won't step, where deer won't graze, and where some swear the ground is hollow but never empty. Mystery 6, the hidden base below Raymer. The dish house shows us how grief can keep a flame alive long after death. But south of Montgomery, the stories shift from ghosts to something strange or something that does not belong to the past at all. In the quiet woods near a small town called Raymer, the ground hums when it should not. No factories, no power lines, no reason for the earth to vibrate at night. Yet campers and hikers say the air there feels charged, like a storm is always waiting but never comes. The first reports came in the early 1990s. Campers lying awake in their tents swore they heard it not footsteps, not animals, but something deeper. A low mechanical thrum under the soil, steady, rhythmic, like turbines turning below their bodies. Some described faint pulses. Others said they felt the ground shift, not like an earthquake, but as though something enormous was moving far beneath them. One camper, a military veteran, said flat out that was not nature, that was engineered. No one believed him until 1997, when two bikers crashed through an old fence near a decommissioned radio tower. They claimed they found a clearing with a steel door set flush into the dirt. Seamless, locked, cold to the touch. The next morning, they brought friends back, but the door was gone. In its place, fresh sod, perfectly smooth, no tracks, no seams, as if the ground had been replaced overnight. Local officials denied any government presence in the area, but through Freedom of Information requests, fragments of documents surfaced. During World War II, a temporary communications facility had been built near Raymer, listed as a Signal Corps relay site. Officially, it was dismantled in 1946. But in papers from the early 1950s, barely legible through redaction, one phrase stood out: subsurface conduit expansion completed. Raymer grid off record. Refer to 4B Alpha. No one knows what 4B Alpha was, or is. It does not appear in any public index. But photos from the 1960s show unmarked trucks hauling equipment toward Raymer, guarded by men in uniforms with no insignia. In 2008, a land surveyor reported something stranger. While mapping property lines near County Road 94, his GPS failed. His compass spun. When he drilled a routine core sample on a flat ridge, the bit struck metal, thick, hollow. Before he could return to investigate, he was told by the county his permit was revoked. He never went back. Residents tell their own stories in hushed voices. Windows rattling late at night when the air outside is still. Trucks without plates parking along the tree line, then vanishing before sunrise. Animals, especially deer, avoiding certain hills entirely, circling wide as if something underground unsettled them. Some say it is Cold War infrastructure, a bunker, maybe even a nuclear facility. Others think it ties back to biological experiments from Fort McClellan, relocated and buried beneath the woods. But the most disturbing theory, that Raymer was a prototype, a facility designed not to be found, not to appear on any map, a place that could open and close itself without leaving a trace. The few who swear they have stood above it all describe the same sensation. The ground feels hollow. Not weak, not fragile hollow, like the earth itself is just a lid. And what waits beneath does not feel silent. It feels patient. By now we have traveled through Alabama's drowned towns, its shifting pits, its shadowed houses, its burning ships, its towers that refuse to darken, and its humming forests. Each story is its own, but together they paint a picture. Alabama is not a state that forgets. It does not bury its mysteries, it folds them into the land, into the water, into the very air. And if you have been listening closely, you know by now these stories are not finished. They are waiting. Alabama is not a place that buries its mysteries. It is a place that keeps them close, tucked into its rivers, its hills, its forests. From the drowned streets of Erie to the shifting earth of the Scatter Pit, from rocky hills watching shadow to the burning decks of the Eliza Battle, from the flickering flame in the Dish House Tower to the humming ground below Raymer, the message is the same. These stories do not end. They wait. Maybe that is what makes Alabama different. In most places, tragedy becomes history. A town floods, a house burns, a ship sinks, and the story is tucked neatly away in a book or on a plaque. But here, the tragedies do not fade into the past. They push back. They slip out when the river runs low, when the ground shifts, when the fog rolls across the water. They remind anyone who listens that time does not erase everything, it just covers it, like soil over a crypt that was never sealed. And maybe that is why people who live here speak carefully about these places. They do not laugh them off. Not really. They pass them along in quiet warnings. Do not fish under that bridge too late. Do not hike too deep into those woods. Do not look too long at the hill where the castle once stood. The caution is not superstition. It is survival. So if you ever find yourself driving Alabama's back roads, notice what the land is trying to tell you. The silence in the woods that feels too heavy. The ripple in the water that does not match the wind. The glow in a window where no one lives. Ask yourself, is this just a forgotten place? Or is it hiding something? Because here, forgotten does not mean gone. And if the ground can open when it wants, if the river can return to town at will, if shadows can outlive stone, then what else might Alabama be holding back? What other stories are waiting, silent for now, but ready to rise the moment someone steps too close? Lock your doors. Keep your lights on. And remember, in Alabama, silence is not safety. It is just the sound of something waiting to be heard.